So I guess we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to bring the Thursday, June 23rd, 2022 City Council regular meeting to order. At this time, I will ask Deputy Mayor French to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
My pleasure, Mr. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I see we have 3 members with us on Zoom tonight. Welcome, guys. At this time, I'll call for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved in second. Anybody have a reason not to move on? See none. Thank you. Approved. On to presentation. What?
You're fine.
Okay. We don't have any proclamations unless you'd like to make one. Okay. At this time, we have a presentation, a Climate Action Committee work plan, Corey. And I believe you have a guest with you tonight. I've not seen this young gal before. Who's this? Oh, Sarah, welcome. No, you got to push a button there. There you go.
Hi, my name's Sarah Phillips. I don't know, I live at 18533 26th Avenue Northeast in Lake Forest Park. And I'm the chair of the Climate Action Committee, although I have my doubts. No, there are 10 members. We have 10 members on this committee, and it's an absolutely fabulous committee. You did a wonderful job in identifying people who would be on it. We have 3 professors. We have 2 students. We have 3 consultants and 2 retired senior citizens. And 1 vacancy. And we've been asking around if there are people who are interested in this issue who might want to join the committee. It'll be good. Yeah. So we've had 3 meetings so far. And the first one was really an introduction meeting where we talked among ourselves. And it was clear at that point that one of the critical issues for this committee was communications and making sure that we were communicating this issue and outreach. It was when I was nominated and elected chair. The second meeting, we did some brainstorming on sort of what were our issues. And again, the issues of communications came up. The second issue was sort of electrification. How do we electrify Lake Forest Park? How do we make sure we're dealing with quality data? And how do we make sure we're using the best practices? That led us to do research on what were other people doing in terms of developing a work plan. And we looked at 2 sets of places. The first was the K4C and People for Climate Action. And both of those organizations have workbooks for how communities can begin to develop a climate action plan. And we looked at those. And then we looked at Shoreline, Kenmore, Burien, and the other plans that were available to see how they did it. And just pretty much there was a standard practice of how one develops a work plan for the K4C. So we said, well, we're going to do that too. And it's essentially what you have in front of you. I think you have something that looks like this. That's our work plan. It's actually the work plan that is part of sort of most of the other organizations. We leaned heavily on it. And essentially the first step of what we're doing is we're asking ourselves the question about what are the emission standards for Lake Forest Park. And we have some data that we're playing around with. We're going to write an article on the number of cars we have in Lake Forest Park and what kind they are. We have 437 antique cars in Lake Forest Park. Who knew? They're gas guzzlers, but I think they're more for show. But we have, so we're looking at emissions. The K4C has been on the cusp of releasing their data about emissions for quite some time. Councilmember Furatani says that it's next week. We'll have some data about the emissions in Lake Forest Park. We've contacted the Cascade Consulting Group, which is the organization that has done that, just to see if it's possible for them to do a briefing for us on Lake Forest Park. And we would think that would be a public briefing. So we would begin to talk about that. But that's the data that we would want to deal with. But even if we don't get that data, it's, are we all old enough to know Karnak the Magnificent? The answer is from the Late Show. No, yes. Karnak the Magnificent, the answer is transportation and buildings. It's where our emissions are going to be, and that's where we're going to have to make significant changes. So that's our first set. We're going to look at that data and figure out what that data is telling us. On the basis of that data, we're going to do phase 2, which is really looking at, given that set of data about emissions, what do we need to, what are we proposing? And then we're going to take that for a test drive as broadly as we possibly can to say to our community, is this right? Have we got it right? Are these the issues? Where do you have questions? What do we need to get more data about? And then on the basis of that, do some revisions. And that would be the third section where we're looking at the revision. We would work on the revision, and then the last, then we would submit it to the council, or assuming that the council will be involved in various communications outreach, and nothing will be a surprise to you. I'm sure Tracy's going to, Councilmember Furtoni will keep you up to date on what we're doing. There are some things that I just want to say, and that is, when we're dealing with climate and the issues around climate, there's an incredible urgency that many of us feel about moving forward. So there's urgency and quality. We want to make sure we're not, we're moving forward, but we're moving forward with the best possible quality. The other thing is that I just want to say that the timeline might be optimistic. This timeline works if everything goes right, everything. So I just want you to know that there'll probably be some give in there. I mean, if, for example, K4C doesn't have emissions for us, or they're not what we need, that would set us back a little bit. In the meantime, we're doing a lot of other things too. As I said, we've contacted the Cascadia Consulting Group to see about whether they could do something for us in terms of finding out both what they do for other cities, because we think that this may require, smart as this group is that you've put together, they may not have all the capacity to do what we need to do. So I want to make sure those budget people are thinking about that already. We're also setting up meetings with the other commissions and task force. We have a meeting set up with the tree board. We're going to meet with the planning commission. Just so the first meeting is a hello, how are you? This is what we're up to. We have our communications committee is led by a 17-year-old, should be 17 next week. And she's developed a plan, which is very good, and has developed sort of a first survey that we were going to test drive at the yoga in the park. We're going to grab those people and say, what do you think about this? And the farmer's market and the concert in the park, and as many places as we could once we began to, we're going to take that survey back to the whole group and make sure it's approved and move on that. And the other thing that's hard is summer. You forget after you've been, inside for 2 years, but people do go away for the summer. Our students have jobs and are in and out, but that's not a problem, and we'll capture that and move forward. We're very excited about it, and we think that there'll be a real opportunity to move this issue in Lake Forest Park.
Do we have any questions for Sarah? Yeah, go ahead. Councilmember Furtoni.
Thank you, Chair Phillips. That was a great report. Appreciated basically the update. And a question I had was, at this point, have you been able to reach out to any of the community nonprofits or other community groups that might be interested in working with the committee on the plan?
Yes, because some of the members of the committee are members of nonprofit, local nonprofits. And I've developed a list for the Lake Forest Park Climate Town Hall, and we're going to go back to that list, and that included the schools, the PTAs, NUSHA, the Stewardship Foundation, and our local, the other local nonprofits. Our notion is that if we don't contact those people and get them involved in this early outreach, we would have missed an opportunity. And it also, it expands our reach. So we would go to those organizations and, prepare press releases or whatever, or links to surveys, for example, and ask them to send that out to their constituency. So if you have any that you think we should be included, please send me a note or send Corey a note and she'll get it to me.
Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation and the materials. I know we have a very active group just chomping at the bit here to get going. I wanted to commend you for meeting with the other community volunteer organizations, our tree board and our planning commission. And one thing you might not be aware of that I wanted to share with you because you mentioned the survey, is that the planning commission did an online survey for ADUs. And they only had a few questions, but they had really good responses, and they did screen for who lives in Lake Forest Park and who doesn't. But what was most interesting is the comments sections were very detailed and very specific about what people were interested in, what concerned them, and so forth. So I simply, it was pretty easy to do. And I believe the chair of the Planning Commission actually helped put that together. And I just think you would reach more people. And it might be easier than going to all the events, or in addition to going to our city events. So just a thought it surprised me how effective that survey was. Admittedly, it's not like a scientific survey, but it's worth exploring, I think.
Yes, and did the city has that capacity? There was like Survey Monkey to send those out, I'm assuming.
I believe our planning director assisted with it. And but I think talking to Chair Larson would give you good information, and you could decide to do it or not after you get that information.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lebo, then Goldman, and then I see Councilmember Riddle has her hand up. So go ahead, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Chair Phillips, thank you very much for the presentation and the description of the work plan. I think it looks very good. I'm excited to see the recommendations, and I'm glad to see that you're consulting with other agencies as well as communities and cities. In the process of developing the climate action plan, does it include recommendations for perhaps funding mechanisms to support some of the otherwise recommendations that will be brought forth to the council as part of the climate action plan? I hope that there are some suggestions or recommendations on how to fund some of the programs.
I'm writing that down. We'll certainly look for it. I mean, I know the county is looking to create some funds available for smaller jurisdiction. And I have been working with the League of Women Voters to lobby for state funding for climate action throughout the state, particularly for small jurisdictions.
So if there's an opportunity to look for how other cities have developed funding mechanisms for climate action plans, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thank you very much for the work plan. I am really excited to see what your committee brings to the city council. I wanted to build off what Councilmember Bodie said. The city of Kenmore has been working on their climate action plan, and I think they've also had a very robust online outreach and survey process. So you might look into what the city of Kenmore has done and what we could do based on that. And a question for you, with the climate action plan itself, does your group envision coming up with some potential code revisions for the city council to consider? Or is the focus more on either administrative actions or actions that members of the public can do?
Too early to answer that question. What we do want to do is work with the Planning Commission, because we think that the Planning Commission must be beginning its comp plan revision this year, right? And so I'm hoping we're going to I know the Climate Committee is going to lobby you to adopt climate as one of the elements of the plan. And then that would allow us to collaborate on the policy, the intersection between climate and the planning process. But at this point, we don't know the answer to that. We're like a day old, so.
Oh, thanks, and yeah, really looking forward to what you send us.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Chair Phillips. In a similar vein, it sounds like you're looking for a lot of data-driven metrics that will yield hopefully a policy direction. But I think it's also useful to see perhaps just general policy suggestions that are maybe broader that we could, as a council, consider, especially if it's a topic where we don't quite have data available yet, but there is, maybe not for the city, but maybe there's data available just generally. So I'd be interested to see if there were opportunities for those kinds of policy suggestions outside of the very specific stuff that you're targeting right now.
I think there are, and I think that those are coming from People for Climate Action that have developed a set of things. I mean, we know you shouldn't buy a gas police car, right? You know that. We shouldn't buy a gas anything anymore. That I don't think you need the Climate Committee to tell you that gas is. And what can we do? I mean, I've had a conversation with Shoreline and Kenmore about putting together something on the lines of and this is baby steps stuff, not anything that's real yet, but a conversation with them about doing what, for example, the East Side cities have done with heat pumps. 5 East Side cities have gotten together. They found providers. They don't call them providers. What are they? People who put in heat pumps, and they get a preferred list of those. And they're talking about how you can subsidize that. And we just had a very preliminary conversation. We've asked the people from the East Side to come over and talk with us. I've been talking with Cameron at Shoreline, but those again are baby steps. But those are kind of, I mean, we know that if people didn't put in, when they were saying, what do you have to do to your house? And they said, well, I'm going to put in a gas heat pump. And we had created enough community support for the notion of heat pumps and the costs, and we had preferred providers. That would be a step that other people are taking that we could just, roll on with. There's some things we know just because everybody else is doing it and they've already started. But I think those are helpful suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Cassover.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Chair Phillips, for the work that you've put into this and for such a good, clear plan that you're showing here. Despite the fact that we all know we shouldn't use gas-powered whatevers, I really would be very grateful if the committee would look at city operations and make some statements about what the city can do in its own operations to be part of the solution. I don't think that, I think it's good that it would come from the committee and not just coming internally from the city, that those things need to be made really clear to the whole community, that the city also is participating in being part of the solution to the climate problems. So I would very much appreciate it if you would also include city operations in your work.
We intend to, I don't know that what we exactly intend to do. But what other cities have done is they usually have sort of this donut graph. Every city has sort of a donut graph, and city operations are a piece of that. They're a relatively small piece of the overall emissions issues. But because of your role as leaders and taking the lead on things, that it becomes more important than the actual emissions that you reduce. So if you say, we can do this, you don't need those, God, I can't talk anymore though. But whatever it is they put on their backs and blow things, if those were electric or battery, that would, and people saw those out in the city, and they, it wasn't offending your ears to get your leaves blown. All of that is leadership on this issue. And as we've talked in the olden days, I did community development, and we said you have to deal with all of the people and all of their problems all of the time. And that's sort of the same thing that has to happen with climate. There isn't anything we don't have to do. If we want to get ahead of this, we have to do everything. And so yes, we're happy to look at it, and we hope to be vigilant as during the budget process, but I don't know how much. I mean, anything you'd like us to look at during the budget process, we'd be happy to. I'm not sure we have the capacity to attend all of your budget meetings in addition to what we're doing, but we want you to be climate forward.
Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Chair Phillips, for all the things that you're doing right now. I think it's a little ironic that we're hearing a chainsaw in the background right now. We're talking about climate. It's a little alarming. I wanted to commend you in your comments about schedule, because this is really important work. And I think your realism that you're bringing to the table here is really important. And I think there are some things in our budget process that certainly we can look at, and I think that there is an urgency here. So waiting for the action plan to come down the line, maybe there's some steps that we can take on an interim basis as community leaders to try to move things forward, because it is really important work. At the same time, I think because this work is so important, a month or two here, to get your dynamic worked out and get a plan together, I think is makes sense. I was writing down what on a list of things toward the latter part of the year, thinking about timing on discussing, your proposals. And after you injected the voice of realism about, the schedule, I crossed that off into early next year. Probably makes a lot of sense, and that is totally acceptable in my mind as well. Do your best work. Don't let the enemy of don't the perfect be the enemy of the good. And my colleagues have talked about a variety of things here, so I won't touch on those again, but I did want to mention on a state level, this next legislative session is going to be critical for the state to step up and start funding some of the various programs out there. I have heard through some of the meetings I've been in, this East Side, I guess it's the East Side Heat Pump Consortium or something like that. And that's a wonderful kind of thing that some of the larger cities have been able to do. And I want that our representatives down in Olympia to understand that their support of the smaller cities and these kinds of programs are absolutely essential as well. And because when you see some of these programs like that, they tend to be the Kirklands, the Bellevues, the much larger cities that have very robust revenue streams. And so I think that there is a real opportunity with our friends in Olympia this next session to push them in the right direction to get some money out that really helps the whole region, not just pushes bigger cities to do certain things. So thank you so much for all you're doing.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Sarah, a couple things. One, when you got up there, you seemed pretty like, oh, wow, I'm in charge of the herd. So here's the deal. Don't worry about it. I know it's daunting. You'll be fine. I've always been surrounded by, I don't even know how many professors I have on the council right now, but I'm surrounded by them constantly, and they can wear you out a little bit. But the secret is you get yourself a bunch of these and you have those sitting there for when you go through the meetings. You'll do great. We'll find you the other person. I will reiterate what Tom said. I'm going to be a little more specific. I think our governor needs to get off the schneid and start putting the money where his mouth is all the time. And that means we need to start helping us, all of us. The state is a beautiful place, but it's sad that we're down to the little 3 square mile area where we are taking on something that should have been taken on by the state a long time ago. And it's more than just our representatives. All of them down there need to start thinking about what's really going on. And the third thing is, good thing I'm a pretty secure guy, because the way you talk about gas, I'm kind of thought about running
I
outside.
know.
If these windows were opened, I would have been out of it. Thank goodness the city didn't build a place with opening windows. But Sarah, thank you very much. You're doing a great job, and Corey will take good care of you. And thank you, council, and we'll be talking to you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
All righty, with that, we will move on to citizens' comments. On citizens' comments, remember you have 3 minutes. If you are on Zoom, please state your name. I will ask Matt to be in charge of this. Matt, do we have anybody signed up this evening?
No, Mr. Mayor, if anybody on the Zoom wanted to address the council, please use the raise hand function.
Nobody? Okay, with that, I'm really excited to announce our first live citizens comment, actually in probably 2.5 years, if I'm correct. Go ahead. I'm just about tempted to give you my Milky Way. So at this time, I'd like to ask Catherine Kernan to come on up, and I'm looking forward to hearing a live voice. No pressure. Now turn the button, hit the button down there below you, just yep. There you go.
There we go. Okay, there I am. All right. Catherine Kernan, 18448 47th Place Northeast, resident of Lake Forest Park for a long time, 48 or 49 years. Good evening, Mayor Johnson and members of the City Council. I'm glad to see all of you in person, and it's pretty lovely, huh? And so tonight I'm here as a member of the Lake Forest Park Library Advisory Board. And this is the 17th year our committee has chosen a book by a Northwest author to be a community read. And so we do a community read for Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Richmond Beach. This year's book is Facing the Mountain, and it's by the Boys in the Boat author, Daniel James Brown. So it's an epic story of 4 Japanese American families and their sons who volunteered for military service and displayed uncommon heroism. This is also the story of those soldiers' families who were forced to shutter businesses, surrender their homes, and submit to life in concentration camps on US soil. I think that hopefully you all got a bookmark that kind of gives you a little, yes, synopsis of the story, and then information on the back as to when we have the book discussions. So that we will have a live book discussion on the 19th, Tuesday the 19th at the Lake Forest Park Library. Now that is a limited amount. I think that there's only room for 20 people, but if you're interested in doing a live discussion, it is there or at the Richmond Beach Library. The Friends of the Library have provided multiple copies of this book that have for the library for checkout. So there should be plenty if you want to go online and reserve one of those. There will also be the Third Place Books has a paperback for sale for 20% off, and that's through the 31st of July. And then we also have an online virtual with the author. He decided that he wasn't ready to do some in-person presentations quite yet, but he will be on, and it's on the 25th of July at 7 o'clock. And you can sign up for that, pre-register at either the KCLS site or on the Third Place Books site. So I'm hoping that you and other residents will be excited to participate in this year's community read. And it's quite an inspiring book, and it's really brings it down to local information. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Tell your friends about this exciting event where you get 3 minutes to talk. It's pretty exciting.
And free Snickers too.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Oh, wait.
All righty, thank you very much. No one else ready to speak? We'll close citizens' comments and move on to the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Any discussion at all? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, thank you, council. Pass unanimously. On to ordinance and resolutions for introduction or referral. Our city attorney, Kim Pratt, will be bringing A, B, and C, it looks like, to us. So welcome.
My first time at this podium. This is
You know, it does
amazing.
raise and lower and you can do all that fun stuff.
Oh,
It's-
good.
Okay, I just want to see somebody play with it. I just,
This is very nice. This will be a little bit more boring than a book recommendation. I'm sorry, but I did love Boys in the Boat, so I will give this one a try too. Sounds very good. But on to PSC franchises. We worked on this franchise for 2 years, and it did take that long because of COVID, personnel changes, etc. So this took us a long time, but we finally got there. I'm going to go through your statutory authority and then some of the key provisions, and please stop me if you have any questions. Your statutory authority to grant franchises, you have broad authority to regulate your own right-of-way and specifically to grant franchises that cover the specific terms of that use of the right-of-way. You are prohibited, however, from charging a franchise fee to PSE. You can recover the costs you incurred to negotiate the franchise, which we have been keeping track of my time, so you will be reimbursed from PSE for that cost. You are separately authorized to charge a tax for utility and natural gas services, which is in the city's code. So key provisions of this franchise that's proposed, length is 15 years with an option for 2 additional 5-year periods. For those extensions, both the city and PSC would have to agree to those extensions, so they're not automatic. The right granted in this case is both electric and natural gas. So PSC refers to that as a dual franchise. And it does cover both above ground and underground facilities. They do have to obtain permits to do any actual work in the city's right of way. And they have to comply with all the conditions in any of those permits. They have to pay for those permits. And so that's really where the details come in as to work that they're going to be doing. If there is an emergency, PSC can go ahead and do the work, notify the public works director within 24 hours, and then get a permit after the fact and pay for that permit. They do have to restore the area where they've done work to at least the condition it was in before they did the work. If they fail to do that, they are posting a $250,000 bond, and the city, after notice and wrangling, could use some of that money to repair anything that PSC was refusing to repair. Vegetation and tree management, I know is very important to council. Vegetation, they can cut vegetation away from PSC facilities. They do have to get a permit to do that, but they do have an option of getting an approved vegetation management plan, which the city would have to approve. But then if they were acting in concert with that pre-approved plan, they could go ahead and do it. Tree maintenance and management has to be done per your tree code. And you have in the tree code a utility forest management permit, which is specifically for PSE and others that you put in there. So they have to comply with all of those provisions. And they also must give residents in the area where they're doing maintenance 10 days notice, 10 days before any scheduled maintenance. Decommissioned poles, I know that's kind of a sore subject. If they determine a pole is decommissioned, it does have to be removed by PSC. It's within 180 days, so it's not short. 30 days if it's interfering with pedestrian or vehicle traffic. The city can also ask PSC to review a particular pole and ask them, is this a decommissioned pole? And if it is, then they will remove it.
There's also the decommissioned natural gas facilities. Those are above ground. PSC can be required to remove those natural gas facilities that are above ground. If they're underground, different things apply. This was very important to your public works director. We went through this with them in pretty great detail, but they decommission those and they leave them in place in a safe condition. And that's pretty well regulated, how they have to decommission those lines. They will provide the city drawings of where those are. And it was very important to the public works director that they also provide the approximate location of this decommissioned line to anyone doing a utility locate. Because as we heard, people hit that line, they don't know it's decommissioned, it stops work, etc. So I think we came to a good resolution on that provision. Relocation for a city project, they do have to, if our city project requires PSC to move their facilities, they do have to do that at their own cost. But if we ask them to move them again within 5 years, then it's at the city's cost. So planning. Dispute resolution, there is a dispute resolution process. Our goal actually, and this was kind of important to Frank before he left, was to make this a shorter process. We didn't want to have it drag out. We recognized that if we were having a problem with PSC, this was probably a big problem, and we didn't want to be stuck in a long dispute resolution process. And they did agree to shorten it for us. There are some very definite timelines. We took out a requirement to mediate. And so they worked with us on that. And then council, the franchise can be terminated if you feel you can declare an immediate forfeiture if they haven't fixed their default that you find. So that would of course be a drastic step. But I'm happy to answer any questions either tonight or as you come up with them during the next few weeks. Email me, happy to talk through those.
Yeah, yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Curious about the undergrounding of electric facilities in section 10. I'm reading that, but I'm not quite sure what it means. Can you give me some understanding in layman's terms on that?
Yep, let me get there. Section 10 undergrounding. So so they have a tariff with the Washington Utility and Transportation Commission. It's kind of like I think of it as their contract with the state on what services they're going to provide, what price those are going to be provided at. And so undergrounding is also in the tariff. So we have to make arrangements to underground through the tariff, under the terms of the tariff. So I could find the terms of that tariff for undergrounding if that would interest you. But that seems to me to be what it says is we need to comply with the tariff and work through the tariff if we want something underground.
I would be interested. I know PSC isn't a very large portion of our city, but it would be interesting to know what those requirements or expectations are.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And this is our first look at this, so I will confess that I haven't read it all yet. One question I do have is the placement of utility poles. If they are an impediment to pedestrian safety, does the city have the right to ask the utility to move them?
I could look at specific provisions, but I think there is enough leeway in city project language that we could ask them to move them. And if it was an impediment, that would probably speed it up, getting it moved. But I'll look specifically for safety reasons to have a pole moved.
I'm particularly thinking of areas where there are some sidewalks where poles are in the middle and you cannot get a stroller around them without going onto the roadway. That kind of safety is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there's usually a reason we didn't have it moved when we built the sidewalk, but I'll definitely look for it.
Yes, Councilmember Fairtami, then you, Councilmember Goldman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Attorney Pratt, for your summary. And like Councilmember Cassover, I haven't had a chance to look at the whole thing, but I'm going to ask a little bit off base question in the sense that I'm concerned about the effects of climate change on utilities, and especially with the experience of PG&E in California and the various fires. And one of the significant concerns in Lake Forest Park with our canopy is, of course, a significant fire. The question is this kind of agreement a place where we can address our concerns about such an issue?
I think I could answer that better if I knew what the concerns were and how you thought PSC might be able to address them. I think you would have some, definitely have some ability to work in the tree management plan if we're concerned about, you know, how close things are to trees, how they do prune things. I know how they prune things has been a concern in the past. So those kind of things we can manage through that tree plan and the vegetation plan. But if you want to give me some other scenarios of things that might be helpful, I can look and see if we already, you know, have something that might work, or is it something PSC has looked at before with others?
I'll have to think about that. Thank you very much.
Sorry, guys, Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. I'll admit that when I look at the map of the PSC electric area, it does strike me as a little bit silly almost how small a sliver of the city PSC is responsible for. Though my understanding is that as a city, it's not really our job to try to negotiate out which utility covers which streets. My question though is when PSC and Seattle City Lights share a street, for instance, like if they're sharing a cul-de-sac, is there anything in this franchise agreement that kind of enforces that they have to work together if there's some sort of electric disruption on that cul-de-sac?
I will take a look. I cannot think off the top of my head something that requires them to do that. There's a general requirement to comply with all laws and, you know, do things in a workmanlike manner. There's those kind of general provisions that we might be able to assert. I could look at both those franchises and see what terms might apply to that situation.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Before I call on Councilmember Riddle, does anybody else have any questions before she goes again? Okay, see none. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Mayor. Follow-up question from Councilmember Furutani. I think one of the concerns that I see is the increase in electric consumption as we move away from gas, both natural gas and vehicular gas. And is there any language in here about like acceptable number of outages before, you know, there's fines or anything like that? So like if they're not keeping up with output, is there anything in this language that gives us a way to deal with that?
No, that might be something more along the lines of the tariff with the Utility and Transportation Commission, but there isn't anything like that in this franchise.
Okay. And as you know, I look at the maps very detailed for these, and I did notice the SCL map seems to have the east edge of Lake Forest Park not accurate as far as its outline. So I just wanted to note that, though, that's that PSE area. So it's not SCL area, but our boundary, I don't think was adequately described on that one document. Thank you.
It's not attached to the franchise, so I think we're okay.
I know, I just saw it, so I figured I'd let you know.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm sure we'll be hearing from Kim a lot more on this subject. So thank you for, it had to be exciting working on this last couple of years. I wish I was there, but maybe next time. Thank you very much.
I get to do the next one.
I know, I was just trying to get you off the hook and say,
Thank
good
you.
night, see ya. All righty, on to the next one.
Okay. These are 2 master use permits that you're considering, both of which I believe the maps are correct, Councilmember Riddle. I hope so, because I took your comments to heart. You recently reviewed the level 3 master use permit in April, I think, so I know these are pretty familiar to you. These 2 master use permits, one is for EXO and one is for MCI Metro. They are both Verizon affiliates. And so the terms of both of these are exactly the same. We negotiated them with the same attorney. We try not to vary terms too much anyways. We like to stick with our form, but these 2 are exactly the same. Brief summary. You have your ability to regulate telecommunications hemmed in a bit by state statute, Chapter 3599, and the Federal Telecommunications Act. The city has, however, adopted Chapter 5.26, which is very detailed on these master use permits and provides a lot of information that we then incorporate into the master use permits. The term of the master use permits is pretty much our standard 5 years. They do require right-of-way permits when the provider seeks to do actual work in the right-of-way, and the provider does pay for those permits. Relocation, this will sound familiar to you. It's just like the PSE. They will relocate if it's at their cost, if it's for a safety reason or public work in the right-of-way. But if we ask them to do it again within 5 years, then the city pays. There is insurance provisions that they have to comply with, and the master use permit can be revoked if they willfully fail to comply or there is misconduct or gross negligence. I don't think you've ever had to revoke one. Happy to answer any questions. You guys could probably write these yourselves. You're used to them.
Okay, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Just a question about the MCI Metro one. In the map, it looks like that their facilities are only along Bothell Way, and they have some underground and some above ground. Would the provision for us doing work and having them relocate apply if we were to do work, let's say, for the Burke-Gilman connector that might engage with them? Is that the type of project that would? And then can we request undergrounding versus just relocating, or is that on their side to determine what's appropriate?
That a project like that for the Burke-Gilman Trail would be a public work. It's defined. I will have to check on what applies to underground versus above ground and what we could require. So I'll check on that.
Thank you.
Don't know off the top of my head. Can't find it quick enough.
Okay, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, City Attorney Pratt. Just from my understanding, and so that I'm clear on it, when we have a discrete scope of work, so in this case where we have, for example, fiber line, whether it's underground or aerial, that is covered by a master use permit, as opposed to, or comparison to PSE, which is really about a service area. And so as a service area, it represents therefore a franchise agreement as opposed to a discrete element of work, which would be a master use permit agreement, correct?
I think that's a good way to look at it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the main difference is federal law treats them differently, and so we have to therefore treat them differently. Otherwise, I think before we made everyone get a franchise.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yep, thanks. I kind of want to bounce off of something Councilmember Riddle said. It looks like on the map, both of these agencies have lines that are along Bothell Way. in the BRT process, if Sound Transit is doing work on Bothell Way, and because of that, some of these lines need to be moved, would that be at Sound Transit's expense, or our expense, or at the franchise expense?
I will say that public work as it's defined in these permits is for the city. So I would let Sound Transit worry about whether or not they would pay for it or not. I don't know. But ours is just for work that's required of the city, and it says third parties would pay for their own work. I don't know though, given Sound Transit's agency status, if they can require an agency to move or not. I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Farahani.
I have kind of a thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Attorney Pratt, for your presentation. I just have one kind of dumb question, which is the MCI Metro franchise agreement expired in May 22nd. Is that an issue?
We did not make them pull out their lines until we got this. They were aware, well, actually, the deputy clerk, Joanne Trudell, she is the one that brought this to our attention. They had gone some changes in attorneys, and that particular attorney wasn't aware that that one has expired. So it's thanks to Joanne that it got fixed so quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cassover.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Attorney Pratt, for all the work that you do on these for us. So I just don't really understand who these providers are. So maybe you could just help me a little bit with that. So these lines don't serve our community, right? They're just passing through us for another purpose somewhere else. Is that what I understand?
I know that they pass through LFP. I don't know if they also serve LFP.
Okay.
I can try and find, I mean, that's obviously a question we can get answered for you.
Okay, thank you. It
Yeah.
just would be good to understand what our actual relationship with them is. Are we simply kind of a landlord here, or are we, are we benefiting in some way?
I know we can't make them provide LFP with service. We've looked at that before. But I'm not sure if either of these entities do provide LFP.
And is it fiber? Is that what's coming through? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bodie, Councilmember French, anything? Councilmember Lebo again.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Goldman's question about other public entities. We do have two public state highways that run through Lake Forest Park, and some of these lines will run along those public highways. And while many of the streets in Lake Forest Park are in fact Lake Forest Park public streets, and for the benefit of the public, it doesn't seem like there should be a distinction about whether a public entity is Lake Forest Park or another public entity. They still are public entities. And is there a way to understand whether or not granting these master use permits or franchise agreements, that those other public agencies would be covered by the rights to have those entities such as PSC move their utilities at their cost?
Well, Sound Transit has the right to condemn, so they could require them to move facilities.
Well, the right to condemn, though, doesn't necessarily lead to the right to remove or relocate. Because
You could condemn them out of someplace.
I'm sorry?
I think you could condemn them out of an area. I'm not sure it's important for the city's purposes.
It is, we represent the public, though, and we are entering into an agreement with these entities for the benefit of the public.
So would you like me to look
Yeah.
thoroughly and see if public work as defined here would cover another public agency?
I would be interested.
I will look at how we've defined public work and see if it would cover another public agency.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, are we moving forward? Okay, any other questions for Kim? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Have a great evening. Okay, with that, we will move on to page, ordinance and resolutions for action. City Administrator Hill. We're speaking on resolution 1848.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight before you for action is the proposed agreement with Two Trading Tigers LLC for ARPA funds not to exceed $52,000 for lost revenue. The contract has been structured to be a reimbursement grant. Requires all backup documentation. In this case, that's Form 1040 Schedule C, profit and loss for a business. Be provided to the city's finance department prior to any funds being dispersed to the recipient. You currently have $300,000 in unallocated federal dollars available for support of small businesses. As you remember, the city cannot allocate general fund revenues to businesses because that would be a gift of public funds. So nothing has changed since last time. I'm just here to answer any questions you may have thought of between the two meetings.
Any questions? I think we have talked about this a few times. So would anybody like to move resolution 1848?
I'd be happy to move that, Mr. Mayor. So let me just, my screen back here. So I'd like to move resolution 1848, resolution City Council authorizing the mayor to sign American Rescue Plan Act grant agreement between the city and Two Trading Tigers LLC.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of resolution 1848, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Okay, with that, we'll move on to resolution 1849, authorize the mayor to sign interagent agreement IAA 22546 between Washington State Administrative Office of the Court and the Lake Forest Park Municipal Court regarding interpreter reimbursement. Pamela, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. Yes, I'm here tonight for the interagency agreement between the Washington State Administrative Office of the Courts and the Lake Forest Park Municipal Court. This is an interagency agreement to provide reimbursement funds for interpreter services for the interpreter language access service expenses. A little background on it. Several years ago, the Washington State Administrative Office of the Courts, which we call AOC, introduced the interpreter reimbursement program. The purpose of this program is to assist courts with the expenses incurred when providing interpreters for court-related matters. In 2021, the program received additional funding that allows AOC to add additional courts into the reimbursement pool. Lake Forest Park Municipal Court is one of the courts that is invited to participate in the reimbursement program. This is due in part to the court's active participation and compliance with the King County Municipal Court's language access plan and regional payment policy. Like most organizations, the state is experiencing staffing shortages and was delayed in sending out the reimbursement program contracts to the courts. Lake Forest Park is one of the newer courts, and we received our contracts months after the currently participating courts. Initially, we thought it was too late to sign the contract and participate. However, speaking with some of the coordinators of the program, AOC understands the delay in sending the contracts contributed to the delay in receiving the signed contracts back from the courts. Lake Forest Park Municipal Court has waited for this opportunity to participate in this program. Court interpreter expenses continue to increase, and it is anticipated that the rate for interpreters will increase again in 2023. It is important for us to take full advantage of this opportunity to receive reimbursement. It is important to note that Lake Forest Park will not receive reimbursement for all interpreter expenses. However, it is a great opportunity to receive reimbursement for a portion of our expenses. There is no matching fund requirement to participate. We must simply follow the rules of the program, submit the supporting documentation along with an A-19, and reimbursement requests will be reviewed by the funding authorities. It is my recommendation for the council to show their support for the Lake Forest Park Municipal Court's participation in this interpreter program, as we continue to provide certified court interpreters to all customers who access justice in our court. This is a one-touch request as it is time sensitive. Thank you. And do you have any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. And for one, I'm pleased that we offer such great interpretive services for our court, and to have the reimbursement is wonderful. Off the top of your head, do you know, are we reimbursed yearly or is it like quarterly? Like, what is the program reimbursement schedule?
It's quarterly, and we are hitting at the end of the quarter. It's actually ends June 30th. So my hope is to get in this section, and then with that, ask them if I can go back to the original time frame and try to get the full year. But just being part of the program makes it really highly likely that we will continue to be part of this program, and that we will get the quarterly funding from here on out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes, Councilmember Farahani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I'm just reading this and saying, so we spend approximately $3,000 a year on interpreter services anyway, and we're just getting reimbursed for this. So this will effectively save the city $3,000 a year?
No, it looks like it's about 50% of for a certified or registered interpreter. Not all languages have certified and or registered interpreters. However, the judge has a series of questions that she can ask the interpreter to qualify them. Once she can qualify them, then it includes that.
Thank you. It still seems like a good deal.
Yes. Anytime the word reimbursement is used, it's a great deal.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation and for following up and making sure that we could get into this program. Really appreciate that. And if my colleagues are in agreement, I would like to go ahead and move this resolution number 1849.
You need to suspend the rules.
Okay. I would like to ask, that was the part I was, yes, if our council would agree to suspend the rules, then I will go ahead and move it. So we first need to move suspension of the rules in order to address this topic.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to remove the three-touch rule on this motion. Anybody, any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of removing the three-touch rule, please say aye.
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 Okay, now carry on.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll move resolution 1849. Resolution of the City Council authorizing the mayor to sign the interagency agreement with the Washington State Administrative Office of the courts for municipal court interpreter and language access service expenses for the period 2021 to 2022. And I should probably get the words Lake Forest Park in there somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution 1849, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes unanimously. Thank you, council. With that, we will move on to council discussion and action. Municipal court security. City Administrator Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to raise this one. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay. I'm not going to bend over for the microphone. So this is for introduction tonight. For many years, the Lake Forest Park Municipal Court has contracted with a private security company to provide security on court days and during jury trials. For the last 2 years of the pandemic, and we're past 2 years now, court days have been held remotely and there was no need to hold a jury trial. As the city worked to move to hybrid meetings, we worked with the court to make sure that they would be able to use this system as well. And what that has resulted in is we now will only have 2 in-person court days, limited to 4 days, so 2 a week throughout most of the year. Due to these limited hours, our current company has told us that they can no longer provide service to the city of Lake Forest Park for such short hours, and then the infrequency and very short notice that they get for jury trials. And so Pamela has reached out, our court administrator, reached out to 6 different security firms, reached out to probably 13 or 14 cities, find out who they used. And then those 6 she reached out to, only 1 is able to provide service, and that service costs $79 per hour. These are retired or officers working overtime that this company uses. That is significantly higher than Allied, who's the current company. They quoted us $45, but are unable to provide the services. Made Chief Harden little light go on in his head of, maybe instead of going with a company that would provide what we already have in a police force, maybe we can make this opportunity available to our own police force to provide these services on a overtime basis. We've had some initial discussions with the Guild, because this would be an amendment to the current CBA that you just signed, or authorize the mayor to sign into. So we would need a memorandum of understanding of how this would work. As we looked through the salaries, these aren't fully loaded salaries. This is just the employee's current base rate at time and a half, and our officers would average about $70 per hour. So we have a savings there. And then we get the benefit of using our officers. They're probably going to know some of the individuals they're helping into the court, but they know the city, they know the layout of City Hall, they know the employees. So there's a benefit there as well. The one thing that we have to look at too is if our officers aren't available, and if there's an event, or we have illnesses, et cetera. And so Pamela has reached out to the company that quoted us $79, and we would be able to enter into an agreement or contract with them as a backup to our own police force if they're unable to provide the services. So we have that covered. I think you'll remember we did look at, looking at this position as an internal position a number of months ago. Didn't really vet very well. The costs, even at $30 an hour, you're talking about an $18,000 a year position, but how do you fill that position, and how do you get the consistency? How do you get the qualifications? How do you find somebody to work 8 hours a day? How do you give them vacation, et cetera? And so there's a lot of benefit to using off-duty or retired police officers. They're very skilled and know how to handle the public, how to handle a courtroom to provide that security. And so before you tonight, as one of the attachments, is a draft MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Guild that identifies how the overtime would be scheduled, how they get paid. It's through our normal payroll system. And then that the city maintains the management right through the chief and the 2 lieutenants, the right respective to hours and scheduling, and may terminate providing court security with notice. And then under fiscal implications, gave you the breakdown. Pre-pandemic, I guess we were paying not living wages, or at least they were not being remitted to our security at $20 per hour. So that 19,000 was an actual end of year budget number. $79 an hour gives you 33,000 estimated, and $70 per hour gives you 29,000 estimated. And that estimated was, I just ran 2 times a week, so 8 hours a week, 52 weeks, and just calculated it that way. You will have weeks where you don't have court during some parts of the season, but then you also could have some jury time. So just to give you a quick rough estimate, that's how that was run. If we go with this now, we have some courts coming up in July that we probably won't have this in place to cover. We already have an agreement, on a temporary infill basis where our police department will still cover those. But to do this long term, we want to get this agreement in place such that everybody knows the rules. And then the last point is that because we have held no court during the pandemic, during most of this biennium, there's sufficient budget to carry us through the end of the year, using our own police force. Questions for me, or if you have anything,
Deputy Mayor
dive deep
Cassover.
into the MOU, the city attorney's here as well.
Deputy Mayor Cassover, then Councilmember Riddle. No, Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Councilmember. Thank you very much, Administrator Hill. I think this is a good solution, practical solution to this issue. But I was curious, you talked about retired police officers as well as current, and I didn't, will that be part of the guild negotiation?
No.
No.
With the guild, it's strictly our officers that are working for us today. This outside entity, they use retired and off-duty police
Oh,
officers.
I see. I was just wondering whether we have the opportunity to use some of our own retirees for doing this too, but that,
Yeah, that would require a separate contract,
Yeah.
So, no.
I get it. Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. For the overflow time where our officers are unable, did the discussion of creating an MOU with like an adjacent city to do the coverage come up? I don't know if that's something that other jurisdictions have used neighboring cities to support them for things like this.
We did not explore that. Using their police officers, I don't know if they have the availability. I know some of the surrounding jurisdictions use the company that we're going to use as backup. So I don't know what their situation is. We did not explore that, but it's something we could look at in the future.
It'd be interesting to keep it local.
And it may be, I mean, with this other company, it may still be local. I'm not sure.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this sounds like a good idea. We get the advantage of using police officers who know the facility. My question is, does Chief Harden think there would be enough interest amongst the current officers that we would likely be able to staff this without needing to go to the backup option?
He does, and he has talked to the guild president. The guild president also has a copy of the MOU. So we've been discussing this internally to make sure, and from what I understand, there is sufficient interest in this. I think, the one reason that we wanted in the MOU, the ability to terminate if this becomes difficult for the chief and his lieutenants to bring us these officers for security, then we will have to terminate it, focus on the work that they need to be doing, and go with the other company on a full-time basis.
Thanks, and I appreciate their efforts to think of creative ways in order to save the city money while having equivalent service.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, or what would you like to do with this tonight, Phil? What would like?
Tonight was just an introduction. We can bring it back at the next meeting, which I think is 3 weeks out. For action, that would require you to waive the 3-touch rule. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of questions. So if that seems appropriate, we can bring it back to you on the July 14th meeting for action.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And now we will speak about adopting the proposed calendar for the 23-24 biennium budget, and our finance director, Ms. Bond, will be up. I can't wait to see the down button work now. I like you. Yeah, I love you, I should say.
Yeah, I know, right? There we go. Just kidding.
There we go.
Okay, we can all have a sense of humor. Okay, so just to go over this quickly, the city has presented a draft budget calendar at some previous meetings, some previous work sessions. We went over it during June's budget and finance meeting. And we also touched it again, had another touch just this evening at the work session prior to city council. And this evening, we're bringing it forward to request that it's adopted through the motion by city council. And that concludes my brief overview.
Have any questions? Okay. Seeing none. Would you like to, anything else we'd like to do with this tonight, or do
Do
you
we
want to prove
need
it?
to actually make a,
That would be great. Okay.
I'd like to move to adopt the City of Lake Forest Park budget calendar for the 2023-2024 biennium.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Anybody else want to discuss anything? Okay, all those in favor adopting the proposed calendar for the 2023-2024 biennium budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I guess we will move on. Anybody have any other business this evening? Okay, then we will move on to council committee reports. Okay, you know me, I'll move right along. Anybody, council member reports? Yes, Councilmember Farrakhan.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was attending two meetings and I wanted to mention them. One was the K4C Outreach Committee, in which there was a presentation by a group involving King County about solid waste, and some significant changes are going to occur. And I haven't really processed it yet, so I don't have a summary of these changes, but nevertheless, next meeting I will. The other meeting I was able to attend was the much more local, the Stormwater Management Plan meeting that our project manager, Andrew Sylvia, was chairing, and brought along two consultants from Parametrics that we hired to help us with the process. And I must say I was impressed with them. There's a lot of great resources on our city. There's links on our city website to some story maps that actually show what some of these stormwater management priorities could be. And I wanted to encourage all the members of the public, especially in Lake Forest Park, to take a look at it and see basically what kinds of actions can be taken, what kind of areas are going to be involved in basically managing our stormwater. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick note, some of you are aware of this, but are through the hard work of our police department and Chief Harden, Washington State Patrol Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division has been out on patrolling Bothell Way 522 the last 2 days, with a special emphasis on illegal equipment and particularly open exhausts. And yesterday, I have to say that I was very stunned how quiet it was comparatively. And then today, it seemed like it was quiet in the morning, and then all of a sudden it got very loud. And apparently that was after they stopped their enforcement. So it does work, apparently. Hopefully we'll get a report about this at some point from the State Patrol, but I wanted to thank our PD for facilitating this. And I'm hoping that our friends at the State Patrol Commercial Vehicle Enforcement will come back again several times, because this is not only an issue of a nuisance, it's a huge health and climate issue with the trucks that are not running particulate filters and proper emissions control equipment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I'd like to report on two things. First of all, the Parks Board will not be meeting this month. They're taking a month off. But for those of you who may have noticed, one of the Parks Board initiatives, with the strong support from Corey, is yoga and stretch in the parks on Saturday mornings. And it's actually going to happen. So it's pretty exciting. It's at Animal Acres, and the notices, I'm pretty sure, once the word gets out, we're going to have, and if the weather's good, people are going to show up. So I really commend the Parks Board and Corey for making that happen this year without waiting around. So very impressive. Second thing I wanted to mention is the Planning Commission met and formally adopted their sign ordinance recommendations. They did hold a public hearing. There were comments from a Better Day Salon about some of the questions, and then some of our new commissioners actually had some questions that were good clarifications. So I anticipate that there will be they will be forwarding their recommendations with a cover memo, identifying some of the issues that perhaps they didn't get to or questions that came up at the public hearing. So just planning for the future. I think they did a really good job on a topic that they initially were not too excited about. And I think it's, and I thank City Attorney Pratt for all the time she spent on this too, to make sure we're consistent with Supreme Court decisions on constitutional rights. And I think we'll be poised to do a really, I think it's the first update that's permanent in 20 years or something like that. So anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you. Yes. Councilmember Branch.
Councilmember Bo, did you have a sense of timing when the council would be thinking about considering their recommendations?
I think that this is something that you and I should discuss, Deputy
You bet,
Mayor
you bet.
and the mayor. Where do we best fit it into our schedule?
Okay.
I do think that we will want to hear from the public and our businesses and make sure we allow enough time for people to digest it and participate. So, but I would think that we could, I'm trying to think, I haven't really thought about the sequence of 3 touches. Anyway, so
Yeah, thank you.
I anticipate that we would want to, in July, talk about it in work sessions as a starting place to see if we have questions or, also, I think we should hear from, the Planning Commission should present it to us. So that would, I think, occur before our work session. So those would be the first couple of steps.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other council member? Yes. Yep. Councilmember Castleover.
Thank you. Yes, I attended the Metropolitan Solid Waste Advisory Committee since the last time we met, and this may be what Councilmember Furtani is referring to, but the initiatives around recycling at the Division of Solid Waste have been really thoroughly examined over the last year or so and really rethought. And so there is going to be something called RePlus, which is Recycle Plus, and it's getting back to the circular economy and, you know, all these things. And we will be asked to sign, each city in the solid waste service area will be asked to sign on to a pledge about recycling and other ways of reducing the solid waste stream. And that pledge will be forwarded to us, I think, in the next month or two. And they will also be sending representatives out to the cities to make a presentation on this. So we can look forward to that, you know, sometime over this fall. I'm hoping that maybe it could happen before I leave on my vacation. So anyway, we'll look forward to that. And then the Northeast Transfer Station, something I keep an eye on because, you know, some of our citizens might go that direction rather than to Shoreline if they need a transfer station. So I've been watching it. They are down to 4 sites they're looking at, 2 in Kirkland and 2 in Woodinville. So they're now going to start the SEPA process. And so they hope to have the decision in 2024. These things take a long time. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on that. And then the other thing that they showed us, which I found very interesting, was the design for the new Southeast transfer station. And one of the things they've done there, which really made me think of this city hall, is they have a canopy that is part of the building that overhangs their front entrance. And instead of building it out of just, you know, regular sheetrock and covers or whatever, it's solar panels. And so it's going to offset about a quarter of their use of electricity on the site. And I know that we, in the past here in the city of Lake Forest Park, have looked at the fact that this building has good southern exposure and that solar would be, you know, something that could work here, but that mounting it on the roof of the city hall apparently has a lot of problems. But I just wondered whether we also could do some sort of canopy along the front that was solar panels. And I just wanted to plant that little seed of an idea. And unfortunately well, you're here, Tracy, so you can take this back to the climate committee. But anyway, it's a very interesting design. And I asked the county if they would be so good as to share with us, with our city administration, their plans and how they did that, because it is an interesting design. So anyway, that's my report for today.
Okay, anybody out there in TV land have anything to say this evening? Nothing? Okay, seeing none. I guess we're on to mayor's report. First thing, are they planning on goat yoga anytime soon? Because I might be interested in that, to be honest.
Not that I know of, but I'll pass that on.
Yeah, pass that on to
Yeah.
Corey Way. Thank you. On a personal note, I would just like quickly thank South County Fire and Mount Lake Terrace Police. My dad's 2 neighbors' houses burned to the ground last night. And my dad's not living at home anymore. In fact, today's supposed to be tomorrow's the estate sale, but I am very thankful. I got called very early this morning, went over there, and I guess they had fought the fire from my dad's house and on top of his roof. And honestly, amazingly, PSC was there actually digging up the road, already cutting the gas lines to both houses. All the 5 people, my mom, my dad's 97, and the neighbor that got out of her house is babysat me when I was a baby. So I'm pretty sure she's 97 something too. And then the other was a young couple with a baby that got out of their house. So I just would like to thank them and Mount Lake Terrace Police and everybody. And also remember how lucky we are to have a great fire department we have and the police department. And because it was an interesting morning. So thank goodness everybody got out and stuff. But remember that stuff and remember the good stuff we have. And otherwise, you guys, that's why I missed first meeting. And thank you for staff for the munchies and all that. I appreciate that very much. Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to share some information. I had a chimney contractor come to my house, and he lives in Lake Forest Park, and he didn't know anything about the city council or what was going on. But he said to me, "We have a great police department." So there you go. So thank you, police department. And you have a higher profile and more public support among the people who maybe don't pay as much attention day to day than we do. So.
On I guess a public interest comment, do get your chimney cleaned, because I have lived through a chimney fire once and they're pretty scary. So yeah, that's a good idea. So with that, I think we'll move on to our wonderful city administrator report. Would you like to read it out loud for us this evening or anything? Next time, okay. Anything you'd like to say about it or anything? Okay, I think you all have it and read it. Yes.
Well, I just like to thank both the city administrator and particularly the police department for the report this time. Very interesting. I myself have observed some pretty outrageous shoplifting in a couple of our stores here in Lake Forest Park, and I am thrilled to see the police department is now actually being able to stop some of that. So thank you for that. It's very disturbing when you're in a community where you see that happen with no consequences. So I'm really pleased to see that that's happening. I'm really appreciative of the work that you did to support the LFP March for Our Lives last weekend. I unfortunately was not able to be there, but my heart was there, even though I wasn't. So thank you for helping with that. And also very impressed with all the police department awards that I see there in the report. So those are members of the public who haven't read the report. It's in the agenda, and I would very much encourage you to read it.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're city administrate. Nothing else. I will guess we will adjourn the meeting at 8:30 p.m. Take a note of that. Wonderful. You guys have a great night. Take care of yourselves. And you take care. What?
The clock's correct.
I know. I looked
He
at
fixed
that.
it.
Yeah. So, no, he fixed it that night. So you guys have a great evening. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you.